Hi, I'm Crystal and Human. Welcome to Iris After Hours here in Fremont. If you're thrown off at all by the fact that we don't have our lovely map at our current Iris office, it's because we're traveling. We're in Fremont, California, and I have David Wagner here. I'm so excited. You guys have to hear his first podcast. We covered a lot of ground about your story, your testimony. We were all crying in Pemba, I remember. It was absolutely amazing. You have to hear it. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me back, Christy Lynn. It's good to be with you in Fremont, my first time here.
So, is it your first time here?
Yeah,
absolutely. How much of the year do you travel? If this is your first time, you travel all the time, right?
Right, yeah. So I've been in 62 nations, but I travel about 250, 275 days a year.
275 days a year?
Yeah.
Do you think that you're going to keep that up for 2018? It's a new year.
I always like to say that I'm going to cut back, but then I always add more. So I'm not going to say that I'm going to cut back, but I'm going to attempt to cut back.
Do you have like epic travel tips? Have you learned a thing or two about this?
Yeah, I always turn my clock or my watch and my phone to the time that I'm going to. Drink plenty of water and chillax.
Oh, wow.
Noise canceling headphones are a savior. So.
Oh, they are. I forgot those and almost lost my mind. Last time I traveled, it was the worst turbulence I'd ever experienced. Have you ever been on a plane that just gets a little crazy and people kind of start like getting jittery and...
Yeah, I actually love turbulence. It kind of rocks me to sleep. But I always look around at the people that are freaking out by it. And if you don't fly a lot, it freaks you out. But if you fly quite often,
it's kind of nice. It shakes things up, literally, in kind of a good way. It
really does.
Something exciting's happening.
And then it gives you this ability to compete with yourself to see if you can hold your coffee in your cup or not spill your Coke on yourself.
Oh, okay.
So, all of those amazing
games.
things that entertain yourself for 16 hours.
Yes. Has that been a journey balancing that much travel, that much ministry with family life and home life?
Yeah, I think that one of the hardest things in ministry is balance.
Yeah.
And because there's always a pull, there's always a hunger, there's always a need.
Yep.
So trying to maintain, priorities and being accessible and available to my wife and to my kids is significant. I'm trying to do my best to live a life without regrets.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look, when I'm home, I try to be home. I try to be present while I'm there. When I first started, cell phones were just kind of coming on the scene. And so we had these calling cards and you had to call from a hotel or a payphone. And
I vaguely remember stuff like that.
And so, but now you have FaceTime, you have Skype, you have all of these different great technologies that you can see your family every day, and it kind of makes the world a smaller place. But there's no book on how to do itinerant traveling prophetic ministry, and maybe I should write one. But
maybe you should write one.
And
you probably
because you learn by doing, and then you just have to adjust every year depending on the age of your kids and what they need. And then
how old are they now?
My daughter is 20. She's a senior at Belmont University in Nashville. Then I have her name is Youre, which means beautiful altar. And she's amazing. Then I have a son, Benjamin. He's 17. He is a senior in high school, wants to go in ministry. So that's an amazing
good.
thing.
It's a good sign.
Then I have Caleb, who will be 16 next week. And he's my football player and fisherman kind of guy. Then Josh is 12. He's my amazing dreamer. He was born with the cord wrapped around his neck, so he didn't breathe for 5 minutes. And,
I think you talked about that in your first podcast.
Yeah, God brought him back to life, and so he's this amazing son who dreams a lot. And then my Isaac is 9 and just full of life and joy. And
is that 5?
So that's 5.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 altogether.
Did you travel this much early on in ministry? Has it ramped up a lot?
I think it's grown over the last 10, 12 years, but I think when I first started, I was doing about 150 days a year, and then just kind of grew from there. But really, since 2010, I think things have really exploded in a great way.
And you've been to Mozambique, you said 13 times.
13 times.
So it's been over a decade of coming to Africa. I feel like you're Iris's prophetic dad. You're so safe, and your prophetic words are so impactful and have been such an incredible voice in our Iris family. And we were talking just before podcast started about how you started out, and I was saying in ministry, did you start out with that prophetic voice, with that kind of prophetic calling initially? And you said you started out how?
I started out as the janitor and the cook of our Christian school. I was ushering and greeting. Had this great word over my life that I would go around the world preaching the gospel, but I had a speech impediment, so I stuttered. I lisped from when I had my two front teeth knocked out at 12, cut my tongue, had 48 stitches in my tongue, so I had
Ooh,
this crazy speech impediment. So my biggest fear was public speaking and
isn't that
those
wild?
things. And so, I think it's amazing how God uses what we think is our greatest weakness or disqualifier, and that's what he calls us into. And so I would just be cleaning the church or serving lunch in the cafeteria of our Christian school, and I would hand the kid their lunch, and the Lord would give me a word for them. So I just 80 prophecies a day, just as kids went through the line. And
That's
the Bible says that your gift makes room for you, and I didn't know it, but my pastor and others were just
were you
watching us.
experienced in the prophetic at that point? Like you knew kind of what it
Yeah,
was, or did you just feel like I need to say this to this
yeah.
person?
So when I first got saved in January 17th of 1997, um, I was hearing the voice of God, but I didn't know how that related. I grew up completely. That wasn't on the grid. That wasn't common, and actually, I think it was actually frowned upon. People didn't
Really?
understand it or didn't
Yeah.
believe the gifts of the Spirit were for today. And so I would just communicate it conversationally. So it wasn't, thus saith the Lord, 6-year-old, you're going to be this amazing
Yeah.
person, but it was this conversational
Mm-hmm.
prophecy. Hey, Billy, you're going to do great things one day. I see you
Mm.
being a mayor or a president or whatever the words were.
Yeah.
And, I was growing up with them. So although I was an adult, on a faith factor and discovering God, I was on the same level as these amazing kids.
Mm.
And I think the Lord just did a work in that and really healed childlike faith in me in the process. And then I was just sharing with you that I can remember the day. It was August 19th of 1999. It was a back to school Sunday night. So we were praying and commissioning teachers and students and parents for back to school. And at the altar, I just one by one, over 100 people gave a prophetic word to. And somewhere in the middle of that happening, my pastor and his son, who's now my pastor, looked at each other and said, "My goodness, David's not a pastor, he's a prophet." And they knew
Yeah.
exactly what to do with me. And so they knew how to train me, how to encourage me in it, how to correct me in it, and help me, mainly know how to deliver it in a practical, meaningful way.
Yeah.
And my gift set is really different. You have the real stern kind of Old Testament prophets. I don't know about you, but growing up, if I heard the word prophet, you thought of this guy with the sunken face and
Mm.
the beard, and he
Yeah.
never smiled, and he was always angry, and it's woe is you, woe is you, woe is you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this unusual gift set that I'm a mercy motivated prophetic guy.
Oh yeah.
And
And you can
so,
feel it,
yeah,
all of the love and compassion every time you give a word.
yeah.
Yeah. It's very
And so,
fatherly.
and for me, what I want to be and what I want to help create and cultivate in the earth and in other prophetic people and in the church, in the body of Christ, is heart prophets and love prophets.
Mm.
How do you communicate? If you understand that the Lord looks at us through the cross, he looks at us through redemptive eyes. So he
Yeah.
doesn't focus on what's wrong with us, he focuses on what's missing with us. And then he gives us
Mm-hmm.
those missing pieces. And I watched a word that I didn't think necessarily was significant. It didn't seem overly quote unquote specific, but I watched
Mm-hmm.
one word, that was connected with love and mercy, move people from not knowing the Lord to going, being on fire, falling in love with God. I've
Wow.
watched that, one word come and people on the verge of quitting, they have their hope healed and things restored. And I think that's the
Mm.
beauty of the prophetic. And I think we spookify things. And one of my jobs, I think,
Yep.
is to despookify the Holy Spirit, to despookify who the Lord is. And I think when you encounter God in that way, you realize he's not mad at me. He's in love with me. And he knows the plans that he has for me and speaks to my hope and to my future. I think that prophecy doesn't ever really speak to the past. I mean, you might have a word of knowledge about
Mm.
something that somebody went through,
Mm-hmm.
but but the focus isn't there, right? It's focused on here's where you are, here's where I'm taking you.
Yeah.
And because I think if things are under the blood, especially, I think that people's biggest fear is, oh my goodness, a prophetic guy's coming. And you start repenting of everything you ever did, thought about doing, or never
Right.
did, but just in case.
I'm okay, right? I'm
Yeah,
okay.
and you think that somehow that this prophetic guy is going to hang this clothesline and put all his, all your dirty laundry out there for that. And I tell people, if it's under the blood, and Jesus said, as far as the east is from the west, I've separated from you. If he can't see it, how can he show me?
Yeah.
Right. So I get nervous around people that focus more on the past than on somebody's present or future.
Yeah.
And so I think just all of that connected to that, married to mercy and filled with love is really what the earth needs.
Is that something you kind of discovered more along your 17 years of doing this? Or is that something that was kind of in you starting out?
Yeah.
In terms of how you deliver a prophetic word, how you communicate with somebody?
Yeah. I think, to me, to whom mercy is given, much mercy is required.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Lord showed a whole lot of mercy to me in my life. And so, I always, when I'm in front of every person, it's kind of like this. How if I'm going through something, right, and I put myself in their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
If I was on the receiving end of a prophecy, what would love sound like? What would this word sound like? I've never heard the Lord say a mean thing about anybody, and I've been in front of some pretty shady people,
Yeah.
and and so it's something that I've cultivated. I've been very intentional about, because when you do this, I mean, it's easy to get up on stage. Now, you're a conference speaker. There's hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people in a room. You could do your 3 best messages, right? You can call the 5 people out, get the hot word of knowledge, and then walk off the stage back to the
Isn't that crazy?
the green room.
Even
right?
that gets that formulaic,
Right.
if you let it.
And so I've been very intentional of not letting myself go there.
Yeah.
I think a real part of revelation is relationship. And I think if you don't have that, then you become robotic in it, you become mechanical in it. And I learned very early on that the Lord's not building machines. He's building men and women. He's after sons and daughters. And I've watched so many people burn out because they've lost that relational aspect. They've lost that love for people. They've let it really kind of grow cold.
Yeah.
Early on, I think about 2004, I want to be careful that I don't give too much information, but I was in Colorado. I was in one city, and I felt like the Lord said, go to this city, meet with this pastor who I knew briefly, just a little bit, ministered to them. I was leaving town again, getting back on I-25, and the Lord said, no, go to this church. And there was another pastor that I only knew, just was in one meeting with them, and I tried to dismiss it, but the Lord said, no, it's important. It's like a life and death thing. And so I went, and it was a huge church, and I had to talk my way to get, make it through the security protocols. And I finally got to the office, and I said, hey, is the pastor here? And I told them who I was and how I was connected. And she called in, and she said, can you wait about 15 minutes? And I said, sure. And about 15 minutes later, the pastor came out. We went in, and the Lord gave me this word, and the word was, you're not a machine or a robot. You're a man, and you've tried to teach people to come to you for everything instead of you equipping the body. And I said, I think there's systems that want you to keep the machine going, but God isn't after a machine. He's not after an organization. He's after something that's living and breathing. And I said, whatever you do, the Lord doesn't want you to quit today. And he started weeping, and he pulled out this piece of paper. And what he was doing in those 15 minutes that I was waiting for him was he was writing his resignation letter.
Wow.
So I got to stand with this pastor who felt like he had no friends, who the Lord put me in the right place. I had no intention of, wasn't on my radar until I was leaving the city to go back and spend time with him. And it's forged this lifelong relationship with him. That night I stood on the platform with this guy who wept in front of his people for the first time and openly repented that, hey, I taught you, you're wrong. I've been the guy that's come out and walked away. And now you've watched this whole thing changed just because of one word. And so I always go back to that. Here we are 13 years later in my own ministry.
Mhm.
And I look back like, Lord, I don't want to become mechanical with it. I don't just want to put on a charismatic show. I don't just want to do this. I want such real revelation that people walk away saying, God knows me. He knows me. He knows me. He knows me. And whether you're in ministry for 50 years or whether you're just meeting the Lord or you don't even know him, to have that kind of encounter, to have that kind of
Mhm.
word spoken to you from the heart of a father, not from, you know, even through a man or whatever, but actually, I think if you're a prophetic person, then you yield your mouth becomes the mouthpiece of the Lord.
Mhm.
And if you hear David Wagner, then I'm not doing my job right. But if you
Mhm.
hear the heart of the Father, man, you can just keep going for that.
Yeah.
I think, probably one of the greatest moments I've had in the Lord, and I've had a lot, but just a simple moment. A couple of years ago, I was in Greensboro, North Carolina, and ministering at a church, and they had invited me to come to this drug and alcohol rehab thing that they partnered with, and
Yeah.
about 50 guys going through a program, and we got there early,
Yeah.
and it was dinner time, and I was hanging out, kind of going around the room, meeting guys, and I sat, across from this guy. I introduced myself, and he cussed me out. He's like, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm here because the court made me come here. I don't want anything, of this
Yeah.
stuff. And you know what? You could be intimidated by that, but it actually excited me because it was real. He wasn't,
Nice. Yep.
you have some guys that just tell you what you want to hear so you can move on. But this guy was actually being real. And I
Mhm.
shared my story like I did on the first podcast that I did with you.
Which is a
And
pretty radical one.
yeah.
Yeah.
And at the end, through the whole thing, he was kind of cross-armed like this and staring me down. And all of a sudden, halfway through, this light came on in his eyes, and he started tearing up. And so when I gave the invitation to come to the Lord, he was the first one down. And I
Wow.
started just giving him this prophetic word, and he interrupted the prophetic word and just started screaming out, he knows me, he knows me, he knows me, God knows me, he knows me. And if I would have never given a prophetic word before, or have given another prophetic word since,
Mm.
that showed me the meaning of prophecy. It's about
He
knowing
knows you.
Jesus more. It's about he knows me and I can know him. It's not so much about future and fortune, but it's life and death and it's destiny
Mm.
and its purpose. And it's the beauty of it. And it may seem so simple, but I think we overcomplicate everything in God, right? We're always,
Yeah.
as this human mindset and
Yes.
these human beings and human doings that we are, we're always on to the next trend. But I don't think he can improve on the methods of Jesus, right? He loved,
No.
he loved people. He met them where they were at. There
Mm.
was no criteria. There was no hidden agenda. There wasn't like, I'll love you if. There wasn't, I will
Mhm.
give you my life or die for you if. It was just this unconditional, wherever he met. The woman at
Mhm.
the well is just as significant as a young rich ruler. There is no, he doesn't classify, he identifies. I think that's the beauty of the prophetic, right? It's not
Yeah.
classifying people in demographics and races and denominationalism or, what river or stream you're in, but he sees us
Mhm.
all through these genuine eyes that pulls the best out of us. And to me, that it's overwhelming. Um, you know, I've been born again now. Next week will be 21 years,
Wow.
serving the Lord, and every day it's just as fresh as it ever, as it ever was.
How do you cultivate that?
I think for me, I refuse to be blinded by the familiar.
Mm.
If you grow up in renewal or around it, or you've been in renewal Pentecostal charismatic settings like I have for the last 20 years,
Yep.
you can become callous to that's just another healing, that's just another miracle, that's just another testimony, that's just another salvation, that's just another
Mhm.
deliverance, that's just another prophetic word.
Yep.
And when you lose the I don't know if it's a word, but the specialness of that, or
Yeah.
it's no longer this amazing, bigger than life thing,
Yeah.
then I think you get callous to it,
Mhm.
and you just, again, you become robotic in it. And I think Bill Johnson said it, familiarity is not your friend. when it comes to the things of God.
Yeah.
Because when I get too familiar with it, I stop celebrating it. When I stop celebrating it, I actually stop receiving it.
Mm.
And I think that's why we find a lot of people stuck, right? I know a lot of people that are stuck in a 500-year-old move of God. I grew up in that,
Mm.
where they're still singing the songs from 500 years ago. They're still
500 years ago.
right,
Wow.
from
Yeah.
Reformation days.
Yeah.
And then there's people that are still stuck in a 100-year-old move of God. So that's where their testimony is. That's where their experience is, or in a in the healing revivals of the 50s. Some people are there. Some people are in the 20, 25-year-old moves from Pensacola, where I live, and Toronto, and other things. And we start praying, Lord, do it again, instead of saying, Lord, what are you doing now? And I think it's all right to go
Yeah.
back to our spiritual memory banks when God did something,
Right.
but I think that's not the end all. I think that's the beginning, and I don't think he decreases. I think he increases. And so, for me, cultivating that is staying hungry. If I don't stay spiritually hungry, I'll replace that hunger with other things.
Right.
Right. So I think that's why you watch so many people in the body, whether they struggle with an addiction, they struggle relationally, it's because they're trying to fill voids or hungers with things that only God can fill. And so, to me, hunger is still it's the key. I'm just as hungry or more hungry today than I was, 20 years ago when I met him.
That's amazing.
And it's intentional, right? It's not just something
Right.
that
You have to
happens.
work
It's
at that.
something that I choose. At the beginning of last year in 2016, I just asked the Lord, what do you want from me? And he just simply said, all I want from you this year is that you'd fall in love with me all over again on a daily basis.
Mm.
And it's this invitation to every day, you know. I'm married, and there's days that I'm more lovable than others, right? But
Same.
love's a choice, and
Yeah.
how my wife acts or how I act doesn't change the fact that we love each other. We choose to love each other, and that's what keeps us whole and together. In the same way with the Lord, I think sometimes we lose that adventure. We lose
Definitely.
that pursuit. And I love the idea of pursuing God. I love the book from years ago, God Chasers, and all of those things. But I realize, it's really interesting to pursue the one who's pursuing you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I picture that in my head, what I really get out of that is this great collision, right? I'm
Yeah.
pursuing him, he's pursuing me, and it's just head on. And I think that pursuit is something that the Lord's really, really restoring. Because I think there's an urgency in the earth. I don't think God's in a hurry, but I think that
Yeah.
we have to have this urgency again in the body. The moment I can sit next to somebody on an airplane, or stand in line at a restaurant, or go about my daily business, and my heart doesn't break for what they're going through, or the first question in my mind is, do they know him?
Mm-hmm.
Not will they join my church, not will they, give to my minute, but really, do they know him?
Mm-hmm.
If I lose that urgency, then I can become lazy in the gift. I can become lazy in those things. And so I think probably a word for the year for me is intentionality.
I was going to
Right.
ask you that. It's New Year.
Right.
And
So I think there's a lot of things. Number one, I think it really is a year of freedom.
yeah.
And I think the Lord is freeing the body of Christ. He's freeing all of us from stuff. I think there's some stuff that God wants to bring us into, but the stuff we've been carrying can't come with us.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that I've got to just check at the door. I've just got to leave it behind. And so I think there's this freedom from false expectations. I fall in that one really easy. I don't want to say no to people, so I find myself saying yes, and overly saying yes, because I
Yeah.
don't want to disappoint somebody.
Yeah.
Because in this false expectation is, if I'm not meeting their needs, will I still be valuable to them?
Mm.
And so I think there's freedom from that. I think there's freedom from these things that these things that we fill the holes in our souls with.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And when you say intentionality in our relationships with people and with God, and
and
knowing Him and knowing each other.
absolutely, I think we have to be intentional. I think sometimes we take this passive
Mm-hmm.
view to life, I think it causes us to take each other for granted, take God for granted,
Yeah.
and take ourselves for granted. So I want to be intentional in my pursuit of Him, intentional in my relationships. And, I have lots of friends around the world, and I find that if I'm not intentional about it, you let way too much time go by
Oh,
where you don't
yeah.
communicate
Yeah.
just because you get caught up in life.
Mhm.
And so everything God does is not accidental, it's always intentional. So I think the intentionality of God is something that we're going to see manifest this year. I think it's a great year of opportunity. I think it's a great year of redemption. I felt like the Lord is redeeming time. And
Nice.
I think that's
Yes.
if there's one thing that we always, if I look at my own life, the thing that I feel like I've lost the most of, or, I get, don't have enough of in a day, or you being
Yep.
a mom, right? It's just like, I don't have enough time in the day to get things done. And I think the Lord is really redeeming the time.
Yeah.
And I think there's, towards the end of last year, the Lord gave me this, I think it was around September. I was flying to a funeral of a man that mentored me early on. He was an amazing man. I was on the plane. And backstory is he started really well, and towards the end of his ministry, he didn't finish all that well. There was stuff there, and I loved him anyway. That didn't affect who he was to me.
Mm.
And there were some people that they didn't take care of that business. They let regrets and all of those things go. And I'm flying to this amazing man's funeral, and as I'm on the plane, the Lord just said, I want to give you an invitation into a life without regrets. And I thought to myself, that's probably one of the greatest gifts God can give
Yeah.
you. What does it mean to live life where I actually absolutely have no regrets? I don't have a regret in my marriage. I don't have a regret with the way I've raised my kids. I don't have a regret in ministry. I don't have a regret financially. I don't have and I said, Lord, whatever that is,
Yeah.
that's what I want.
Sign me up.
And I think it's living in the center of God's will. A couple of years ago, I was going through I just call it a funk, right? You just get in this place where you can call it burned out, you can call it whatever, but I was burning the candle at both ends, running around the world like we do, and my daughter was going off to college, to university. I was going, just nonstop, and I was supposed to be in a conference in Australia with Bill Johnson, and turns out that the conference in Australia was the same weekend my daughter was moving to college.
Mm.
And so my wife said, I think you should cancel the trip. And I said, man, this is Bill Johnson. Like,
Kind of a big deal.
it's kind of a big deal. It's not like,
Yeah.
and we committed to it. And so I said, I need to go. She said, I think you should stay here. The kids are going to need you.
Mm.
And really what she was saying was, I need you. Right?
Yeah.
What I heard as a man is fix it. So I got the best babysitter. I got, I covered all of my bases, and went and had, some of the most amazing meetings, amazing miracles. Hung
You went
out.
to the trip.
I went
You
to
went
the
on the
trip.
trip?
I went to the trip. And flying high, Bill's invited me now to the Bethel Prophetic Conference. I'm so excited. I call my wife one night as she's getting on the plane to fly back after dropping my daughter off from school, and she questions, is it worth it? Is this worth it? I needed you at home, but you were somewhere around the world. And there's this tension, right, between my family and this tension between I could justify it either way, right? I'm doing the Lord's work. I'm at this, this is who I am. We made a commitment. At the same time, not ministering to my family. And I remember coming back from that trip, and we were going through all kinds of stuff. And I had to call, your mom. I had to call Heidi, and I had to call Bill and others and say, hey, I've got to readjust some things. Some things aren't going here. And I remember the Revival Alliance people they were somewhere on their, their annual kind of time together, and they had me call in to minister to them. And it was great. And, at the end of the Skype, then they all start praying for me. And Suan Che's wife just said, "Oh, poor David." I'll never forget it. Poor David. She starts giving me this word, and that's not how you want a prophetic word to start,
Poor
right?
David.
Like
Yeah,
poor
that was
David, poor
okay.
David. And she's like, You've got it all wrong." It's one of those things you don't want to hear. And she's like, you've done the
You're gonna turn this
ladder,
around?
you've done the ladder model, you've done the stair step model, and you've got, Jesus here and Molly here and your kids here and ministry here and all of these things, but it never works right that way. Jesus needs to be in the center. And when I adjusted, you realize that if my marriage flows out of Jesus, if my ministry flows out of Jesus, if my parenting and fathering comes out of him,
Yeah.
then everything is in balance. And that's really how you live a life of no regrets. It's been this amazing kind of couple of
Was that a
year.
big shift for you?
It's a major shift for me because it's humbling, right? I mean, um, you do this thing, and everything you do is for the Lord, and you want to see souls saved, and you're seeing miracles. I mean, who doesn't want to see that in your life? And then you go home, and real life is there's a void there. And sometimes my kids don't need a prophet, they need a dad. And my wife doesn't need a traveling ministry, she needs a husband.
Yeah.
Right? And my friends don't need me to tell them their future, they just need me to hang
Be
out with them, have
present.
coffee,
Yeah.
and be present. And so there's this, I'm sharing all of that in the part of what does it mean to live a life without regrets? And so I can look at those things, and I could say those things the enemy really could have used those things to be some of the biggest regrets of
Yep.
my life. But those are things that are now testimonies and things that you've worked through or are working through. If you're like me, change isn't always the easiest thing, and so when you come through that, what a powerful gift and invitation. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that the Lord is really, encouraging us in this year. Is
Yeah.
if I could filter things, will I regret this decision? Will I regret saying yes here? Will I? And I think that question can save a lot of people a lot of grief. So I told you I ramble sometimes. I
I
hope
love
I didn't
it.
ramble, but I think this is the real part of ministry that maybe other people don't see,
Yeah.
right? They see
Yeah.
us on stage with the smile and the prophetic words flowing and the stories and the testimonies, but what's the price behind the scenes? My people see me, but they don't see the fact that my wife and my kids have paid a high price for me being able to be who I am and do
Yeah.
what I do. And so when I hear my 17-year-old say that he still wants to go in ministry,
Yeah.
and the mercy, you know the love of God that compels
Yeah.
is phenomenal. And so these aren't tears of regret or sorrow, but man, just the loving kindness of God. And I think probably seeing these things are probably just as important as hearing the stories of raising the dead and healing the sick and prophesying to kings and presidents. And because there's people watching that are maybe they're counting the cost, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to
Yeah.
figure out and put context to the prophetic word. I've got this great call to the mission field. I got this great call to travel the world. And you know, um, I think there's a lot of wisdom in the scriptures. When what would it, what would it mean to me? What profit is it to a man to win the whole world but lose his soul or lose his family or those things? And so, I think it's a year where you fall in love with him all over again, and he falls in love with you all over again,
Yeah.
and then everything flows out of that, and
Yeah.
it's a powerful deal.
Wow. Ah, it's so good. In talking about that redemption of time, and you were saying someone even thinking about this great prophetic word I have, but maybe I've messed up somehow, or I'm not seeing it, or what would you say to people who feel like maybe there's been an expiration date on that word or on that call? Or does God like shift the prophetic calling on your life if if it's been this amount of time, or I feel like that comes up a lot where people are like, I missed it. I had this word, but I missed it.
Yeah. So here's some great things that I've discovered about the Lord. You will never get him to change his mind about you.
Mm.
You will never get him to change his mind about you. I think everybody's biggest fear, if you're in our stream, right, the biggest fear is I don't want to miss God.
Mm.
And my question is, how can you be this close to him and miss him,
Yeah.
right? And I understand that there's times we make choices and decisions and all of those things. What I've discovered about prophecy is this: number one, it's in part. We know in part. It's partial. We know in part. We prophesy in part. So we just get the piece at the time. It's progressive. It builds over time, and it's conditional. Now, the great part of that condition is it can never be canceled. It can be reassigned. It can be delayed. All of those things, but the Lord will make good on His promises. I had this word over my life about going around the world going around the world preaching the gospel wherever I go, lives will be touching change. And I got that word when I was 6. I didn't step into it until I was almost 30. And I used to start my testimony with like this: I wasted the first 26 years of my life. And 2 years ago, when I went to say I wasted the Lord just stopped me and said, you can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
Because what you call wasted, I call perfume. What you thought was wasted is actually what I've used to build a platform for your ministry. And He redeems the time. He is merciful. I look at the scriptures and what David didn't finish, Solomon passed on. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So what Abraham didn't finish, he passed on to Isaac. Isaac passed it on to Jacob. There's things that I may not finish in my life, but I'll pass it on to Era and Benjamin and Caleb and Josh and Isaac, and they'll carry it on. But I think we have to understand the mercy of God is stronger than we think, and the plan of God is more sovereign than we think. There was a song a few years back, and maybe it was Misty Edwards or somebody, but the words were, I knew what I was getting into when I called you. I knew what I was getting into when I said your name, and I loved you just the same. And whenever I hear that, man, he knew every failure. He knew every time I'd miss it. He knew when I would say no when I was supposed to say yes.
Right.
He knew when I was in
And
America.
sometimes we think I said no, or I should have said yes at that point, and I didn't. So now what?
Yeah. I think you fall on the mercy of God in those moments. And I heard a wise man say this the other day, that you're only guaranteed 2 days, this day and that day.
This day and that day?
Yeah, this day that I'm living in now, and that day when I see him face to face.
Oh.
So I have to live this day.
It's like,
It puts things in eternal perspective.
Yeah.
It tells me I don't want to waste a moment, but at the same time, I want to live towards that. I want to live towards eternity, making a difference. I can't change the past, but I can't let the past disqualify me either. And I think that's the thing where you just, all right, Lord, I fall on the mercy of God. I missed it. And your grace is sufficient. Your mercy is overwhelming. And I just trust you to redeem the time. Maybe there's people listening, and I believe there are today, that God wants to make up for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a 7-year harvest. There's a 7-year acceleration for people that feel like they're 7 years behind, or 3 years behind, or they just feel like they're behind in their calling. And I just feel like there's a wind, a wind of purpose for people that are caught up in that transition. There's a wind of purpose for people that feel like they're stuck. And don't underestimate the power of repentance, right? It's not just like, sorry, I missed it, but it's, okay, Lord, now I'm making myself, putting myself in this place where I'm going to be abandoned to obedience. I want to be absolutely abandoned to whatever you call me to. Whatever you call me to, I just want to say yes.
Yeah.
And I think that you'll find yourself living in a miracle, living in a dream. And I think those that sow with tears reap with joy. And so I feel there's that great redemption that's coming. And again, you can't change the past. You can't change where you missed it. But you should use those things to propel you and to motivate you that I don't want to miss it again. I know what that disappointment feels like. I know what that frustration feels like. Now I want to just step into purpose. So hope that makes sense.
It does. It's so awesome. I know it's speaking to me. So I know it's got to be speaking to so many people. And I'm going to ask you, first of all, thank you so much. This was amazing. And I'm going to ask you a few informal questions. Change things up a little. Do you prefer the mountains or the beach?
Mountains.
Ooh, why?
I live now at the beach for 20 years.
That's right, you're from Florida.
Yeah, so I grew up in Chicago, which was flat and buildings,
Yeah.
and then I moved to the beach, and I do love fishing and all of those things. But when I'm in the mountains and just the fresh air and kind of feeling somewhat secluded, I really love that.
Nice.
Love the atmosphere of it.
Yeah. Are you much of a hiker?
I don't exercise much, but you don't get a body like this doing all that
Same.
exercise. No, I like to explore. So
Yeah.
if you're going to go on a fast track, I'm not that guy because I'm the guy like, oh, squirrel, look at that bird.
Nice. Favorite sport?
Baseball.
Baseball. Nice. All American.
Yeah.
Good one. Oh, did you watch the World Series?
I did, and I'm a Cubs fan, so last year was my year after hundreds of years of waiting.
Hundreds of years. Come
So
on.
that was really great. And then this year was amazing. I think with everything that happened in Houston with
Yeah.
the storm and all that,
Yeah,
to,
that
to
was
watch
pretty
them
awesome.
come. Plus,
Pretty solid.
I'm an underdog guy, so when there's a team that's never been in there before,
Yeah.
there's a part of me that says, "Come on, you can."
That was the first game I've been really into, or series I've been into.
Yeah.
Love it. Favorite movie? I don't know if this has changed because we asked you this.
Yeah. So I am normally like this romantic comedy guy. My wife laughs at me.
Yeah, so is my dad.
I'm really into chick flicks. I like to cry in movies.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
So, but my favorite of all times, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yes.
Not the most sanctified movie. I'm not saying don't go rent it tonight. But I have. I used to watch it.
I didn't endorse this.
Yes.
But I am
I
kind
used
of.
to watch it every Thanksgiving Day for many years. And,
That's great for someone who travels all the time too.
yeah.
It's just a good one.
It's just funny. And
Yeah.
I like to laugh.
Yep. And finally, what are you most excited about in 2018?
I am really excited about a lot of things. I'm excited personally because I think the Lord's bringing me into some new directions, and I've started some. Last year, I did a couple prophetic schools, and so I'm going to build on that
Yeah.
this year.
Do you think the prophetic's for everybody?
I believe everybody is prophetic. They may have never have tapped into it.
Yep.
So I think it's for everybody in the sense we all should all receiving, we should all be hearing, we should all be edifying, exhorting, encouraging people. I think
Is it a muscle you develop?
I think that, yeah, I always say, doctors practice medicine, lawyers practice law. I'm going to practice in prophecy and healing and miracles and all those things. I think the more you practice it, the more you work that prophetic muscle out, the more the more you'll encounter it and become proficient in it, if that's the right sense.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about all of the things that you see in the earth today, right? There's all kinds of divisions, and there's political craziness, and there's all of these tensions everywhere. And here's what, maybe when you see that, what I'm about to say, people may think I'm crazy. But I'm of the mindset that if you want to know what God's about to do, look at what the devil's trying to do. So in the midst of all of this division, in the midst of all of the racial tension and the he said, she said, and all of those things, I flipped the script. And so it tells me this, that there's about to be a great movement of unity in America and in the earth, that people are going to begin to drop the labels and the polarization and begin to come together, being drawn by the heart of God. I don't think it's just some crazy dream. I actually believe it's reality. I believe we're going to see just an outpouring upon all flesh, like Joel talked about. I think that the enemy's trying to get us to go into black church, white church, Hispanic church, Asian church, and kind of keep ourselves separate. But there's this great coming together. I was just in New York City, what an amazing expression of diversity in the
Yeah.
church. I'm here in Fremont, California, and I look around and there's every shade of color and different kind of backgrounds. And I'm thinking, man, that's exciting to me. So in the
Yeah.
midst of all this stuff happening, here's some good news. And so
Yeah.
I'm getting really excited about that, and all of this stuff that's coming out. All of these, the Me Too movement and all of those things. Um, that there's activism and all of those things in it, but what to me it's saying women are finding their voice, and that excites me for my daughter, for
Yeah.
my wife,
Come
for
on.
my sisters, right? So it may be something that's a reaction to something that's happening, but I think there's a prophetic thing behind it, that women are really
Absolutely. Yeah.
finding their voice.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I'm really excited that I think that this is going to be about this next generation, because they're not status quo. They don't want what the last generation had as far as church, and right.
Yeah,
They
there's
want
been a real shift in that,
they want
for
something that's
sure.
real and relational and relevant and revelational all at the same time. And so those things really, really excite me. And
Yeah.
so
You're getting me excited. It's going to be a good year.
it is.
It's going to be a good year.
I think it's going to be the best year we've had so
Come
far.
on. Thank you so much. Oh, you're so
Thanks.
inspiring. You have to keep coming back.
Thanks for having
I'm
me.
sure you will. We'll make you. It's fine. No, you like it.
I do like it.
You like it, right?
I have more of a face for radio, but podcasts are doing great.
Thank you. We hope you guys have been inspired too. David Wagner, literally, like I said, feels like a dad here at Iris, and I love it. And you can subscribe at iTunes to the Iris After Hours podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. If you have comments or questions you'd like to hear us ask, you can leave them in the comment section under our YouTube channel. And from Fremont, thanks for watching.
This podcast is presented by Iris Global. For more information or to support the work of Iris Global, please visit us online at irisglobal.org.